Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is August the 13th, 2024. It has been 3,851 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 173 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 years and 171 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression, and 8 days since Ukraine counter-invaded Russia. Today's podcast covers the events that happened on Monday and Tuesday morning. You will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description. There are a lot of map updates today. Hello, new listeners! I record 5 days a week from the Kyiv region, and I deeply appreciate your trust and support. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. We maintain that there is an elevated and continuous risk of Russia intentionally targeting civilians in Ukraine due to the ongoing Kursk offensive. 2. In our assessment, Russia will restart sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure by October, continuing Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 3. Although Ukraine's operational and strategic objectives in Kursk are still unclear, we maintain that Kyiv intends to defend captured territory and continue to advance into Russia. This is the last day for this entry. 4. At this time, we maintain that Ukrainian forces do not have enough resources to defend Toretsk and New York and the approaches to Pokrovsk and Selidova. 5. At this time, we maintain that Russia will achieve the operational goal of capturing Toretsk and New York in 2024, and we further assess that for Ukrainian forces, an extended battle in an urban environment is ill-advised. 6. Despite the battlefield situation, Russian losses of armor, mobility and personnel continue at an unsustainable level. 7. The Russian economy is weaker than reported. 8. Persistent delays in the delivery of promised military hardware, munitions and funding continue to prevent the Ukrainian armed forces from reaching their full combat potential. 9. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. 10. We maintain that the policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States, and to a smaller extent Germany, is a failure and has proven to be ill-conceived. 11. We assess that the United States, Germany and the leadership of the NATO alliance are shifting their policies on escalation after Moscow's muted response to Ukraine's Kursk offensive. 12. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear power plants. Our team is covering 2 wars, and David, our chief content officer, described all of us as a bit crispy. We're still doing split reports, which means that some sections are on pause. The whole team appreciates your understanding as we work overtime to cut through the fog of war. Today I start with the action report summary. Yesterday, Russia carried out 134 discrete assaults, and through the 12th of August, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks was 114. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, carried out 67 airstrikes, dropping 96 bombs on civilian and military targets in Ukraine. Russian ground forces conducted 4,400 fire missions using tubed and barrel artillery. Overnight, Russia launched 38 Shahed-136 one-way drones and 2 Iskander-M or North Korean KN-23 short-range ballistic missiles. 30 Shaheds were shot down. Let's go into the details of what happened on the battlefield. This would be a good time to open up the war map on a second device and find the city of Sumy. That's in the northeastern part of Ukraine. There is a link to the map in the podcast description. Ready? Here we go. The most active region is in Russia, as Ukraine's counter-invasion enters the 8th day. At the end of day 7, Ukraine controls almost 674 square kilometers of Russia. Another 268 square kilometers are Russian claimed as under Ukrainian control or in the grey area. The entire area is 942 square kilometers, or 3.14% of the Kursk Oblast. The breach is 73.4 kilometers wide, and Ukrainian forces have advanced up to 28 kilometers in depth. In the Korenevo area of operation, or RIO, Ukrainian source Deep State reported that Ukrainian forces had entered eastern Korenevo, where fighting was ongoing. Russian mercenary mail blogger Rybar reported there was fighting in Tolpina. Rybar added that there were no reports of Ukrainian troops in Vetrina or Matveevka. Moving to assessment. We believe Ukrainian forces advanced north over the Krepna River to reach Tolpina and are attempting to encircle Russian forces. The same river is west of the settlement, with no bridge crossing. If Ukraine can reach Kolychevka, they will hold the ridge over Korenevo and sever the Russian ground line of communication, or GLOC, that's a supply line. We returned Krasnooktyabrsky to Russian claimed occupied by Ukraine due to a lack of information, and coded Snagost as contested again. Additionally, fighting was reported in Lgovka. In the Lgov operational direction, there continues to be significant fog of war. Multiple Russian sources reported a Ukrainian troop buildup near Semenovka, and Rybar claimed Ukrainian forces tried to advance in the direction of Kauchuk. Russian sources claim that Ukrainian troops reached Общий Kolodys, but we did not update the map. Back to assessment. Russian troops are north of Lgovka and control Kremyanaya and Sheptuchovka. There are no viable GLOCs that Ukraine could use to reach the village. Ukrainian forces continue to maintain very tight operational security. NASA Fire Information for Resource Management Systems, or FIRMS, suggests there is fighting in Safonovka, which is to the east, but we need more evidence to make an accurate assessment. Russian sources claimed Ukrainian forces maintained a presence in Kromskie Byki and advanced in the direction of Durovo-Bobrik. Ukrainian source Deep State had the villages of Pogribki, Orlovka, Marievka and Novaya Sorochina in the grey area. We updated our map based on their intelligence. More assessment. It is possible for Ukrainian forces to advance to Kromskie Byki on the Lgov-Sudzha road, as it does not pass through any settlements, is heavily forested, and is raised above the surrounding open fields. However, it's a 16-kilometer drive through an area where there is little evidence Ukraine has firm control. Our analyst team firmly believes Ukrainian forces have advanced much deeper into the Kursk Oblast based on the random geolocations of Ukrainian forces. It's clear Moscow doesn't want to admit it, and Kyiv doesn't want the world to know, yet. In the Sudzha AO, fighting continued in Cherkasskaya Porechная, where Ukrainian forces made marginal gains. To the west, Russian sources claimed there was fighting in the hamlet of Kositsa. Rybar claimed that Ukrainian forces occupied the hamlet of Kukuy, east of Bolshoye Soldatskaya. We marked the area as Russian claimed Ukrainian occupied, but we are unsure how stable the R200 highway GLOC is. Ukrainian forces were reportedly pushed out of Martinovka, which would give Russia control of the highway. Wait, after finishing the situation report, there was an update that Ukrainian forces reoccupied Martinovka. Someone will update the map. Russian sources claimed there was fighting on the eastern edge of Mirny, and nearby videos showed smoke in the area. Based on the information, we coded the village as contested. Ukrainian forces reportedly occupied the village of Agronom, and Russian attempts to push into Bondarevka were unsuccessful. Russian source Rybar claimed that Russian troops occupied the hamlet of Dmitrukov. Russia has been attacking the Sudzha Gazprom gas compressor and metering station, which is still used to transfer gas to Europe. Satellite images from Planet Labs shared by the United States state media agency Radio Liberty show the administration building and above-ground infrastructure have been severely damaged. In the Belaya AO, Ukrainian forces were visually confirmed in eastern Plekhovo after defeating Chechen Akhmat, confirming the settlement had been liberated. Ukrainian sources reported that the village of Borki was liberated, and Russian and Ukrainian sources reported Ukraine controls Spalnaya. We believe that Russian troops have retreated north across the Psel River. Up to 2 platoons of Ukrainian mechanized armor were ambushed in Girye and Torfa-Razrabotki by Chechen Akhmat and elements of the Russian 810th Guards Naval Infantry Brigade. 3 Ukrainian BTR-4E infantry fighting vehicles were destroyed and 1 captured. A Kuga HE infantry mobility vehicle was also abandoned. Chechen forces took several Ukrainian soldiers prisoner. It was the first incident of significant resistance by Russian troops since the counter-invasion started. Moving to assessment. The villages of Krupets and Kamyshne are almost certainly under Ukrainian control. However, due to the lack of visual evidence, we maintain the area as a grey zone. While the incident at Girye is unfortunate, Ukrainian forces advanced almost 20 kilometers in a day. A Russian Ka-52 Alligator attack helicopter fired on a Russian armor column, destroying 2 Star S-152mm self-propelled howitzers and causing mobility kill damage to a third. Ukraine thanks the Russian aircrew. The Financial Times reported that the Ukrainian Air Force is using JDAM-ER bombs provided by the United States to strike Russian targets inside the Kursk region. There have been several reports of Su-27s operating in the Sumy Oblast. A video released by Ukraine, recorded by a Russian POW, showed 4 members of the Rosgvardia looting a Russian home. While filming their special looting operation, he complains that other troops had already ransacked the home and referred to the evacuated owners as, quote, rich. After a week of near silence, autocrat Vladimir Putin held a press conference with the acting governor of the Kursk Oblast Alexei Smirnov and other officials. Smirnov publicly revealed that Ukraine had created a 40-kilometer wide bridge, had advanced 12 kilometers in depth, and controlled 28 villages before Putin angrily admonished him, saying, quote, "Do not reveal such things." Are things not going to plan? Smirnov prevented having special tea with Putin later in the day by accusing Ukraine of using chemical weapons. Russia claims that 181,000 people are under mandatory evacuation orders, and 121,000 have already left the area. After a week of fighting, it was reported that 12 civilians were killed and 121 wounded, including 10 children. I don't want to minimize civilian deaths, but the official Russian numbers stand in sharp contrast to civilian casualties in Ukraine. Putin accused Ukraine of attempting to improve its position at the negotiating table and then, in a stunning act, declared, quote, "What kind of negotiation can we even talk about with people who indiscriminately target civilians, civilian infrastructure, or try to threaten nuclear power facilities? What can we even talk about with them?" He went on to declare that Ukraine would receive a, quote, worthy response, and that all goals of the so-called 901-day special military operation would be achieved. Let's go back in time to February the 24th, 2022. One of the justifications for Russia's so-called special military operation was a preemptive strike before a Ukrainian attack. Objectively, the special military operation is a complete failure. Did you know that Russia is the first nuclear power in history to be invaded? Before you ask, yes, I know about the Falklands War, and I consider it as a different matter, which could be a topic for an entire separate podcast. Putin declared that the response would be treated as a counter-terrorism operation and would be led by the Federal Security Service of Russia, or FSB, and the Rosgvardia. Putin is the head of Rosgvardia, which is under the command of Viktor Zolotov, Putin's former bodyguard. Prior to being appointed by Boris Yeltsin as the next president of Russia in 1999, Putin headed the FSB. Completing the task of pushing Ukrainian troops out of Russia has ultimately been made the responsibility of the new Minister of Defense and former economist Andrei Belousov. I'm guessing Sergei Shoigu is very happy that he got demoted earlier in the year. Colonel General Alexei Dumin, aide to autocrat Putin since May 2024, was named the commander-in-charge of the Russian defensive operation. Dumin has been a close Putin ally, including serving as a bodyguard, and led the Russian invasion of Crimea in 2014. Back to assessment. The autocrat is using the Ukrainian invasion to tighten his grip over the entire Russian government while continuing his purge of the Russian Ministry of Defense. By the orders given, ultimately the control of Russia's defense is in the hands of Putin. In Kyiv, the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, publicly acknowledged Ukraine's offensive for the first time during the meeting of the staff of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief. Quote, "As of now, about 1,000 square kilometers of Russian territory has been taken under control. The situation is under our control." During his evening address, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky declared, quote, "Russia brought war to others, and now it is coming home. Ukraine has always wished only for peace, and we will definitely ensure peace."
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Let's not forget about my home. Here is what happened in Ukraine, starting in the Kharkiv Oblast. In the Liptsy-Vovchansk AO, fighting continued in Vovchansk and north of Tykhe. Russian mercenary Melblogo Vogonza reported positional fighting in the area of Gliboke. In the Kupiansk AO, Russian attempts to advance towards Sinkivka and Petropavlivka failed. Ukrainian forces prevented Russian advances in the direction of Novoosinovo, Glushkivka and Krugliakivka and continued to defend the southern half of Berestova. In the Luhansk Oblast AO, Russian attempts to advance toward Stelmachivka and Andriivka were repulsed. West of Kremenna, Russian forces carried out 24 assaults on the eastern edge of Makiivka and in the directions of Nevske, Terny and Torske. There were no changes in territorial control. Now let's talk about the Donbass and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Siversk AO, Russian attacks in the direction of Verkhnyo-Kamiensk from Zolotarivka and in central Spirne, where Ukrainian forces made a small advance, were unsuccessful. In the Kostiantynivka AO, fighting was reported in the area of Bogdanivka and on the western edges of the canal district of Chasiv Yar. Ukrainian forces held their defensive lines in the Toretsk-New York AO. Russian attacks between Zalizne and Toretsk and near the center of New York ended in failure. Russian forces continued their attacks from occupied Yurievka in the direction of Panteleimonovka, and a Russian assault in the direction of Korenevo was unsuccessful. In southwestern Donetsk Oblast, there were no changes in territorial control in the Pokrovsk AO. Russian forces carried out 52 assaults, including on the eastern edge of Vozdvizhenka, north from occupied Novoalexandrivka in the direction of Zelena Pole, from occupied Timofeevka in the direction of Yelizavetivka, and on the eastern edge of Grodivka. From occupied Serhiivka, Russian attacks in the direction of Mykolaiivka and Novozhelanne ended in failure. Fighting continued in Zhelanne, and Russian attempts to advance toward Ptyche and Skuchne were unsuccessful. In the Kurakhove AO, Ukrainian forces held their defensive positions on the Lozova River in Krasnogorivka, on the western edge of Georgiivka, in western Paraskoviivka, and in southeastern Kostantinivka. Finally, in the Vuhledar AO, fighting was reported east of the T-532 highway near Vodyane and southeast of Vuhledar, with no change in the situation. If you've listened this far, you are correct. Russian forces did not gain 1 square meter yesterday. We are seeing numerous reports of Russian reserves being withdrawn from Ukraine to defend the Kursk region. However, it's too soon to declare that's the cause. The International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, released an update on the status of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. IAEA inspectors were granted access to the cooling tower that caught on fire over the weekend. Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi said, quote, "Based on the observations, the team assessed that it was unlikely that the primary source of the fire began at the base of the cooling tower. The inspectors determined that the fire likely started on the interior of the tower at the water nozzle distribution level, approximately 10 meters above the base. The IAEA reported that the debris was, quote, consistent with melted and fallen plastic mesh from the fire, and samples of debris and molten plastic were collected. The team did not smell sulfur or detect accelerants and believe the fire was, quote, more likely caused from burning plastic. There was no evidence of tires or drone debris found during the inspection, and there were no signs that the fire scene had been tampered with before their arrival." Director Grossi added that the team has not been able to draw, quote, definitive conclusions based on the, quote, findings and observations so far. In simpler terms, the IAEA is leaning towards the fire being an industrial accident. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.